The next process is around change management. Big deal stuff. All right, so when we think about this, again, starting with the end in mind, this is the idea of making sure that we not just minimize that time, but we decrease the depth of productivity loss that will happen, and it's that WIFM conversation, okay? So here's our thought process for today in terms of change management. So in some of my secondary research, what we find in general is that you need to have senior leaders, you already know this, on board at the initial stage in the process. And then as you move through that path of change management, they need to be less involved, quite honestly, less involved, and you need more peers to be advocates. This doesn't always happen, or sometimes you don't have the senior leadership involved in the beginning. That's not good. It's not going to end well. But if you have them involved at the end, you want them to reduce their level of influence over time so that you have a greater sense of peer influence that happens. This is not just tables and chairs. This is any sort of change management model. That's what happens here, okay? The other thing that we think about is that when you do have leaders involved in that process and sort of this stage, this is McKinsey's study, an organization will be very successful or extremely successful depending on the visibility of that senior leadership in that process of the change, okay? So when they're not involved, bad things happen. When they are involved in the process at the initial stage, good things begin to happen. Not Herman Miller research, McKinsey, but I think it's good stuff. So the idea here is that you have a great amount of resistance to change, and so you may want to help people along in that process to help get them on board. So this is, Kurt Lewin is a social psychologist. This is all sort of basic change management stuff. It's the opposite end of the spectrum. So enablers that support change are a greater sense of involvement, recognition, when you have measurements, when you have leadership support. I already told you that that was important. When you don't have these things, you have what Lewin calls obstacles, and this is based on fear, mistrust, poor communication. So when change goes wrong, it's because you have more of this and less of this. So think of this line here as shifting music mixer bars that may go further along in the process, one end or the other, but you have to really think about what these things are. What are the fear factors? What are the issues of mistrust? What is the poor communication that's happening? Because if you don't identify these challenges, they will never become enablers for you, okay? So again, basic change management, it's important, so just keep that in mind in the process. So I like to talk a little bit about fear because that generally is the reason why we have issues around change. It tends to be, a lot of it is mistrust and poor communication, but a good amount of it is fear. And it's fear that's based on failure. It could also be fear around loss of control, a fear around loss of belonging. A lot of it in terms of the workplace is around loss of esteem or status. I'm losing my private office, okay? So when it's based on fear, I love this quote, fear is the dark room where negatives develop. I think that's very true. So keep this in mind. I want us to think about these questions. I just put these questions up here for us to think about. This is a concern around the issues that we need to consider a change management process. Has anyone become abnormally quiet? That's generally not a good sign. What are people afraid of? Why do people feel these fears are justified? And what can the organization do to remove the cause of these fears? So we need to be able to answer these questions. I would think as leaders in the room for at the client leadership, we need to be able to ask ourselves, how do I react when others make a mistake? What is my first question when something goes wrong? And we know the answer to that, and so we want to make sure that we're more supportive in this process to be able to have a good dialogue with it, okay? So I think that fear is certainly a concern that we need to rectify in terms of the change management process. So the process of change is really the process that one goes through grief, and then at some point in time you move toward this issue of adoption and exception of the process. For us. So I think that this is certainly over time, good things will happen. Again, that's your productivity dip there for the organization. So this is our model. I like it, and so I'll share this with you in terms of our change management process. The problem around change is typically related to one of these issues. So the formula here is the V stands for vision. Many times when change is a problem is when folks don't know the vision. So what we find is that executive and director level people will know why we're doing this move, why we're doing the change, but your middle management people and your feet on the street field employees do not know the vision. They may know what the mission is of the organization, but they don't know the vision behind the new workspace, what you're trying to achieve. And you may think that the director level people are cascading that information. Generally, they're not. So it's important for everyone to understand the V, or the vision, in this discussion, okay? When there is a problem, it's because one of these things. Either they don't have the vision, they don't understand the vision, or two, the K is knowledge. The knowledge are the 250 to 300 different questions, quite honestly, that we have found people will ask in the change process. Am I going to sit next to my best friend Carol? Where is the nearest gym? Will you have dry cleaning services? Where's the nearest dry cleaner? Is there a cafeteria there? What services are free? Is coffee free? Do I have to pay for coffee? Where's the nearest printer? Why don't I get the printer that I had before? Is the printer going to be shared among 4 people? Is it going to be 2 on a floor? How many printers are we going to have? What kind of trash can am I going to have? Will it have recycling and a regular work trash can? All of those questions, quite honestly, there are 250 to 300 that we have kind of dialogued with our customers. We can't go through all of those, but we can prioritize kind of A, B, and C. The reason why you have a problem with change is either they don't understand, someone does not get the vision of why this is happening, or they don't understand the knowledge. Now, someone in the room, when I talk about vision, will always say, well, if they don't like it, too bad, they can get their pink slip. So a pink slip is not a strategy, right? In terms of change management, that's not a strategy. And if that's the way that an organization might feel, then they probably have lots of issues around engagement that we need to have another serious discussion about, right? So pink slip is not a strategy. They need to understand what the vision is of the organization. You also need to be able to answer those 250 to 300 different questions. And I'm very honest about that. They need to understand that. Yes, ma'am?
Do you have that list?
Yes, I do have that list. You can have that list, possibly. So we'll see. So these are services that I provide, and so I'm kind of giving you this information. But yes, I can share some of that list. I can guarantee I can share some of that list. But honestly, there's about 250 to 300 different questions. And so what we would do is help the customer rank those A, B, C, because you can't do all of that, right, at one point in time, but sort of figure out what are the most important ones. And it's really those questions. Am I going to be sitting next to my best friend Carol? I mean, those tend to be those issues. Okay, then the third part of this formula is HD, or a healthy sense of dissatisfaction. So someone has to understand, everyone has to understand what they currently do not like about their current space. Either it's so noisy, or it's so quiet, I can't connect with anybody, or I hate the carpet, or the place stinks, it actually smells, or I hear rumbling of all the pipes and all of that, whatever it might be. It always floods in the front, and so my feet are always getting wet when I come in. Whatever the healthy, there's lots of dust all over the place. Whatever the coffee bar is horrible, or typically it's the break room is disgusting. That's one of them. The break room is disgusting. I don't have enough space to get my work done, or there's too much clutter everywhere. Those tend to be some of those things. So you have to understand what the healthy dissatisfaction, not this place sucks, right? That's just dissatisfaction. You need a healthy sense of dissatisfaction, right? Something that you can change. This space sucks is not sort of helpful in the process, right? In the change management process. So you want to determine what the vision is and make sure that everybody understands that. Every single person that's going through the change, every single person. You want to make sure that all of their 250 to 300 different questions are answered. That's the knowledge. And you need to know what, Carrie? Is that right? No? Christy, sorry, I can't see. What Christy thinks is the current problem of her space. And it's not just her workstation or her office, but the whole space in general of that environment. We have to know that as change agents, okay? We just can't assume that Carrie is unsatisfied with something. We have to really understand what it is. If you have these three things, the perceived cost, or the PC, the perceived cost of the change will matter less. The perceived cost of the change will matter less if you can identify for every single person, not just director level, not just, management level, but every single person needs to understand these particular things for themselves. And as change management agents, we need to understand these things as well for them. If you don't have one of these three things, then the perceived cost of the move is going to be paramount for the individual, and they will be pissed about that change, okay? So you have to spend a lot of work over here to make this more compelling than this, okay? All right, so how do you do all of that? Well, one thing you can do, in my opinion, something that we do in our long sessions, is this stakeholder analysis. And I don't put these faces on here, I just did that for you. But you get the gist of this, okay? So in a workshop, I would suggest, or this is what we can do for you, what you would do is a stakeholder analysis. And you can figure out, so for one of my clients, they identified 20 people. Sometimes, most of the time you do this by department, but some customers will actually identify people. Michelle. And Michelle was someone, and 19 other people at this one particular client, that was not only not happy, she was not supportive of the change, but she was also very active. She was very vocal. So that's Michelle here in this quadrant. You want to know your lower right people, okay? These are people that are active on the right and upset. People that are passive generally are on this side, and I care less about them, quite honestly. In the time that you have to work through change, you need to focus on these people who are quite vocal, in my opinion. So first, you have to identify these. One company, it was the merchandising department. All of them were these folks. They were upset about the move, and they are vocal. And so it's important to identify them. And you know who they are, but you have to write it down. At the same end of the spectrum, you need to know your upper right people. I'm generally an upper right person, but you need to understand who those people are. So those are people that are actively engaged, that are very vocal, and they're super committed to the new change. These are your cheerleaders. Oh gosh, they love this. What can we do? You want to know them. Why? Because they are the people that are going to be on your change management team. At one company, my client called them the Culture Club, and at another company they called them the G-Move team, because that was the G was the first letter of their company. So they have different names. So you want to find out who these upper right people are, okay, because they are your advocates. You need them, your apostles, however you want to call them. You need to know who they are. So I would identify them by name, quite honestly, if you can. At the same time, you better identify your lower right people. And many times you don't want to do this. This is an unsettling conversation. This is a roll up your sleeves. People might get upset in the room. You don't care. You have to get to this place. Honestly, I've had this situation happen. Quite unsettling in Toronto once, where we had this discussion of lower right people. Sometimes that person was in the room. But many times they're not, because they're not engaged in the whole process anyway. But you need to know these people so that you can begin to understand what are the Ks that we need to answer for them, right? What are the knowledge pieces? What are they currently? Are they dissatisfied about anything in the current space? Do they understand the vision? How can we get them on board with the vision? So it's either a V, a K, or an HD that they're concerned with that we need to fill with them. But if you don't write it down, then you can't do about it. Okay? So soapbox, getting off of that for right now. So that's the idea. So in terms of posts, to someone's question over here about, so has this really done anything in the process and putting all of this together? I'm going to give you 2 case studies. This is a global tech company. After you put this methodology in place, we did surveys and focus groups and interviews with them, and they felt like they had a better alignment of their real estate to their business outcomes and a higher sense of employee experience. And we also did engagement survey work with them as well. Okay, just 1 case study. Another case study that we did, this is a global consumer brand. So 23% after doing this whole work, 23% felt like they were working more effectively, 19% felt like they had a stronger sense of community, and 27% felt like they were more valued by the organization. Those 3 things matter to me as someone who's studying engagement in the workplace, because in my mind those 3 things lead to the Gallup Q12 questions, and that links to someone being able to answer in the affirmative that they're more engaged as opposed to less engaged in the process. All right.